The back of our minds, but I heard something about some kangkong being very cheap today. That's what I heard is taking the rounds. But I wear a few hats, but my work for the many years have been in the NGO world. I do human rights training. I'm with an NGO called Pusat KOMAS, but today here I'm also one of the members of Community Action Network, which is a small organization registered in the church in the last 20 years working on justice and peace issues. I use the word registered because in the last few days we've been battling a new media statement issued by Kementerian Dalam Negeri that has called the Coalition of Malaysian NGOs Against UPR, which is about 52 placement. Datuk Thasleem, let's give him a big round of applause. Datuk Thasleem, at the really last minute, he has worked with Dr. Farouk and many NGOs who has just said yes to share his thoughts on the topic. And he has spoken very much on this topic in many forums. You may have heard him speak before. He represents a NIAT as a chairperson. This is one NGO. He got two NGOs as a chairperson. The first one is NIAT, National Indian Rights Action Team. To Community Action Network, thank you. So these three NGOs are co-organizing this at a very timely fashion. Our next speaker I would like to introduce is Reverend Hermen Shastri, no stranger to the Malaysian human rights scene. He's the Secretary General of the Council of Churches of Malaysia. Let's give him a warm welcome, Reverend Hermen Shastri. How the system of the church functions. So our four speakers will help us get deeper into this topic. At the back of your mind, you may have a lot of issues, feelings, emotions about what's happening to our country on the issue of freedom of religion. You will have a space to also share your thoughts or ask questions.
No, if we are pointing our finger, they're saying that they are basically stoking this kind of racial incitement and trying to create disunity among us, among different races or different religions. But could we like shut our eyes towards this Pakatan Rakyat? And as we know, the fiasco started in a state of Pakatan Rakyat in Selangor, in this state. I think this PJ in Selangor, right? Yeah, all right. So, I mean, remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. And that is what is happening today. This morning, this verse came into my mind, and I was just about to prepare my slides when suddenly somebody shared an article by Jacqueline and Surin in the Nutgraph that exactly said whatever that I wanted to say tonight. I don't know whether you have read her article, but if you haven't, you should go back and try and read this article on the Nutgraph. Right? So it's basically the problem that we're facing nowadays. Right? Because it took so long was that it was trying to say that whatever it is, we have to understand that this constitution is the highest law of the land, right? It is not the Quran, it is not the Sunnah. So if we were to believe in what Isma leader said, what Zakir, what's his name? Zaid, yeah. No, Zaid, I mean the Isma president. Yeah. If, you know, like he was saying that this is an Islamic country, which is wrong. No? Before I came, I read his statement, right? He was saying that, you know, like everyone has to follow the rules and regulation of this country. I'm going to argue this again because I've said this on many occasions. In fact, during the forum at the Bar Council, how secular is our constitution? I've argued the case of Che Omar Che Soh and a few others, right? To say that, you know, this country, and based on the interpretation of Lord Reid and his commission, is that it is not an Islamic country. So Article 3 of the Constitution reads, Islam is the religion of the Federation, but other religions may be practiced in peace and harmony in any part of the Federation. Article 3 was meant to mean that as far as official ceremonial matters are concerned, Islamic fall, but you have to have what they call a basis, right? Or examples or evidence to show that such an incident would cause disharmony or would cause chaos in the society. And if like many of us, we have lived abroad before, like we have lived in England or in Australia or New Zealand, and say for example, if I were to live in Australia, right, and then the Australian government passed a law saying that I could not propagate my belief to others, or I cannot share my belief with my friends and so on and so forth, how do I feel? So each other, they were trying to out-Islamize each other. Each of them were trying to out-Islamize each other. Because of that, we are being trapped in the middle, right? We are being trapped in the middle. When PAS said we wanted an Islamic state and we wanted to implement hudud, then suddenly we heard from down south, from Johor, one UMNO lady said, no, we also want hudud, right? I do not know whether they really understand what hudud is. Tried to break off peaceful, conventions and conferences, and even recently they held demonstration in front of a church in Klang. I believe some of them are here, where a Bible was torched. I was surprised, and it was being done by Perkasa, headed by Perkasa. Can you imagine a Bible being torched in this country and nobody said a single thing? What could have happened if someone burns the Quran? It will create havoc, the whole country. But nobody says a single thing, and a few others, of course. And when the Bibles were confiscated recently, they issued a statement saying that a blatant disregard for the 10-point solution made by the federal government in April 2011 and reiterated by the Prime Minister in 2001 and reiterated by the Minister in 2011. That was it, right? That was the only statement being issued, a very mild statement being issued by this NUCC, right? And
for that, Dr. Farouk. We continue with the discussion. I invite now Reverend Hermen Shastri to share his reflections. He's been on this topic of freedom of religion for years, and so he will continue now his reflection. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and dear fellow members of the panel, my friend Ahmad, Farouk, Musa. You used the word mess, and I would start my contribution. Proud as Malaysians that there is a provision in our constitution which guarantees the right of all people of faith to practice, to profess, to administer their religious affairs in peace and harmony with each other. Nobody in this world will be able to take away this right from any peace and dialogue has been dealt with the prime ministers of our country. So, we have had long conversations with the former Prime Minister, Tun Dr. Mahathir. We have clarified the position to him. He has shared the Muslim mind to us, and we have said that we have no intention to confuse anybody. And during his at that point, so again, when the Bibles were all detained in Port Klang, we met with Badawi. And we shared with him the same thing. And being the nice man that he is, he said, yeah, I understand. Yeah, so, you must understand my situation and my people. Yeah, but that's your responsibility to deal with your people. We cannot impose anything upon the Muslims or the Malays. And the third is our current Prime Minister. And the problem did not cease, and in our negotiations with him, lo and behold, we have the 10-point agreement, which all of you know about and have read. And it was his sincere and ardent conviction as Prime Minister of all Malaysians that Christian use. So how can one religion claim an exclusive right that this word only belongs to one particular religion? So if we go down that line, it becomes indeed very confusing, and the only way to make that not so confusing is to import an element of control and fear building. That if you use... Now, who is proselytizing the Muslims here? And how do you understand the word proselytizing? Because any Muslim, anywhere in the world, can take any scripture from any other religion and read it for his or herself. And if he or she is convinced that there is some truth to some of the other religious, that is Christians, to declare, we don't proselytize each other, and therefore we can live in peace. And I'm sure that would be possible. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Reverend Hermen Shastri, for taking us through history. I think we've forgotten the old newspapers. He still has the photocopies there. But it's interesting to note that the dialogue has been happening at many layers. This is the highest officers of the representative of the church. Back, and we will announce your number, so you have to go and remove the car if somebody is early. The third point is that KOMAS is doing a live webcast of this event now. So if your friends are not able to be here, if they have access to internet or on one of these phones, go to YouTube and look for KOMAS, Pusat KOMAS, yeah? KOMAS videos. Go to YouTube and then you choose KOMAS videos, and it's live now. So our friends are not here. So SMS, send your friends who are at home to watch.
And jihad for justice, of course, is a much better word for somebody, because they think jihad means taking a knife and going parang and chopping around. No. The best jihad, according to Prophet, peace be upon him, is to go to an unjust ruler and ask for justice. An unjust ruler here doesn't mean only our agong and sultans. It means anybody in power. It can be even your superior in the office. So that I hope explains. Read in the name of thy Lord. He didn't say read in the name of Allah. Rabb. Read in the name of thy Rabb. Translated is Lord. Who created thee from a cloth. Notice that the word Rabb, or creator, or the Lord, is used the word Allah, revelation. Of course, it coincides. I was just going through, if anybody reads Azli Rahman's article today, I think, or yesterday, in Malaysia Today. Her mother's name is Mariama Francis. And Mariama Francis is not my daughter by any blood relationship. She just has grown up with us for 25 years. She worked as a nurse in my wife's practice, who's a doctor. And she's like a daughter to us. She gave birth to Imelda. From 3 months, she's with us. She goes to Sunday school. She goes to church on Sunday. That worries them. If today, if the Catholic, the Hindu, the Muslims, we can coexist as brothers and sisters, then the robbers and the thieves and the daylight robbers who run the country will have no place. I have forbidden injustice for myself, so it is forbidden amongst you. So do not be unjust to each other. Injustice is one of the most bad qualities, most widely practiced among men since the dawn of history. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it haram, unacceptable, and whoever practices injustice cannot be a good Muslim. So to me, I don't have to say who are the good Muslims or who are not good Muslims, not my job. But I'll just read out one letter short list comes to fatwa. You know why I was joking about the fatwa? There is a fatwa saying that merokok adalah haram dari pandangan Islam kerana padanya terdapat whatever it is. National Fatwa Council has given a fatwa that smoking is haram. And yet, they'll give halal certificate if you can sell cigarettes. That's the irony. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dato' Thasleem, another speaker who speaks very candidly. He's been known for none. Has the government spoken? The silence is getting louder and louder, and I think that Dr. Farouk already said, why take 6 days to come up with a meek statement? And I think that's the background of where we are trying to address this issue. Finally, not the least, but a speaker who's been listening and reflecting from all other speakers. So let's give another round of applause to Father Clarence Devadas.
Let me just stand and speak, for the benefit of those of you who are stretching your necks from the back to see who this is. There was this little boy who was 6 years old. This little boy was a Malaysian of Indian origin, and he lived in a little town about 60 kilometers north of Kuala Lumpur. He came from a very small family, and his father was a civil servant, and because he was a civil servant, they lived in government-provided housing, what those days you would call government quarters. I'm sure you are quite familiar with that. And his neighbors, both on the left and the right, were Malay Muslims. Where to eat, either in this house or the other house. Every evening, it was a great event in that little neighborhood because all the children would come out to play. And they would play things like football. I don't know whether you would resonate with me. You remember catching? You remember catching? Police and thief? Says, you remember chopping? Ah, you remember that, yes, so okay. But I'm not that old, I'll get that, in the sense that I was quite hungry, so I stopped in this little Chinese coffee shop to have a meal. And as I was ordering my meal and I looked around, I was quite surprised. I saw also a little nasi lemak stall within the Chinese coffee shop, which was serving non-halal food. And each one knew how to respect one another. And I was shocked. And this is something that I would not have envisioned to see in the city center, in a place like Kuala Lumpur. Historically, Malaysia has been a place where the outcome of this forum, maybe we can work at tackling some of these issues at a grassroots level. And maybe for this to happen, all this, we need to put our hearts and our minds together. Just this past week, I don't know, some of you have been reading, if you've been reading the Utusan Malaysia, Christians have been painted to be like, evil, impersonated. The headlines were quite alarming, quite frightening. And not just the Christians, after the elections, we have another racial group also, the target of many racial slurs in our country. It has made Christians sound as if they quote from the Bible. And this is what the disciples of Jesus went to him and said, in the context of saying, who is the greatest? They want to know who's the greatest in the kingdom. And it says that Jesus called a little child, and he said that unless you change and become like this little child, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Of course, there are many scripture scholars amongst us this evening. But a simple way of understanding for me is this, that Jesus called for childlike qualities. And one of the things that we admire in children is that there are no racial or religious divisions. We must believe and we must learn from one another. Let's leave aside all the polemics, the theology, the politics that seems to weigh us down every day. And what I'm saying is that maybe we need to learn how to make friends with one another, people of different faiths. And sometimes we are part of the problem because our friends are most often of the same ethnicity. and those whom we relate with. Maybe we need to reach out to one another. Politicians can manipulate only if we allow ourselves to be manipulated. And if we can...
All of us have memories of what it should be based on our past experience, but that script is being rewritten by the present day people in power. And thanks for the reminder to get back to basics. You know, build mutual trust, build friendship, while the big politics is happening there, but what's happening on the ground. And thanks for that, Reverend Clarence does. You've heard 4 excellent speakers who've spoken from their hearts, very candidly. And now the turn is over to you, who you may have some questions directed at them. If you have, you can...
Conference last year, that yes, it's good that, you know, whites work with us and cooperate with us, but we need white people in South Africa to talk to white people, you know, and that was during the apartheid. So I think for us in Malaysia, we are very, very heartened to know that there are Malay Muslims or Muslims generally who have this kind of thinking, very harmonious, yeah? But we do need to know how you can speak to fellow Muslims who are trying to persecute us for no reason, and whether, you know, how we can help you to do this. Thank you.
Thank you.
To plead with them about our cause is so damned feudal that I feel we are back with Parmeswara. I think, you know, we've got to have a better way of dealing with these kinds of issues, and dialogue is the only way. Thank you.
Thank you. Our friend here in front.
Hello. Right, Assalamualaikum and a very good evening to everyone present here today. I'd like to thank the excellent panelists for their opinions and thoughts regarding the matter. I'd like to first start. My name is Arif Subhan, and I was a former student of Victoria Institution and also Intech Shah Alam. I'd like to start with a quote by Muhammad Abdul.
Okay. The school is run by missionaries, Christian missionaries. And let me tell you that in this Chinese kampung, in this land of Chinese gangsters, the school has a student population of almost 99% Malay Muslims. This proves that the education department is very, very comfortable with Christian missionaries teaching their children. Nothing wrong, perfectly, we live in perfect peace. Nothing wrong with it.
Because my friends, the people that I know and the students that I teach who are Malays, they are fine. They say that Allah belongs to everyone. So I'm really curious where these Malays come from, that is investigated by Merdeka Center.
Okay, thanks. That question, I hope someone from Merdeka Center is here. We can direct it to her. And this lady in front here.
Celine Fernandez. I have a question about the 10-point agreement. If anyone can answer the question. How binding is this agreement, seeing that this is a cabinet decision?
We in the Islamic Renaissance funds were being attacked, left, right, and center, right, and labeled being as liberals and so on and so forth. And it didn't come only from groups like ISMA. It came even from PAS. Right, in the recent Muktamar or the General Assembly, I think there was an article published in the, was it Free Malaysia Today? You know, regarding this issue, that was being brought up by the Dewan Ulama PAS, right, called as GBM, Gabungan Bertindak Malaysia, right, where there are like-minded NGOs in there. And of course, people like Ikram, the more moderate Islamic NGOs are inside Gabungan Bertindak Malaysia and so on and so forth. So I believe that the most important thing is for us to push forward and liberate the mind of the Muslims, right? And to make them understand what is humanism all about, right? Because the problem with the Muslims nowadays is that they believe that whether they're Muslims or can I take the second? I'll take the second one. I guess there was about a question about the mindset. What actually led to this fiasco that we are currently facing? To me, I think, I do not know what about the other panelists, what they think about it, but I think then whatever they do is based on their conscience, right? Based on their fear of God and based on their free will to do or not to do. Not because they're scared of some people who are trying to catch them because they don't go for Friday prayer or because they drink in a pub or something like that. It's because of their conscience. This is what we call in the Arabic term or in the Quranic term as at-taqwa, God consciousness. And Prophet said, at-taqwa hahuna, consciousness, your God consciousness is here. It's not somewhere being shown outwardly, wearing a turban or having very...
So demonize, scandalize, you call them heretics or whatever, and ostracize, and therefore they have to be controlled. So for the creation of fear, for fear to exist, these things must be there. And I think we see a very good example of that here in this country as anywhere in every part of the world. Secondly, I think one of the things that we need to take away from this discourse is that if you think to always very quickly want to target another as being the source of the problems in this world. But there is one language. There is one language we all agree, and I think our sister right in the first one who raised it. And that is the language of human rights. Because we are all human beings, we all identify with the pain and suffering, and we know what it means to be demonized, to be scandalized, and to be ostracized. Own up to the agreements or to the consensus or to the decisions that have been made. And therefore, Idris Jala, who was one of the main architects in that negotiation, must stand up and declare, or else he is not fit to be a Christian, that this is what he has said in that negotiation. And that is the reason why the Prime Minister has written a letter and signed that letter.
Culture. Which Arabs? Which Arabs? we got one hell of a lot of, there it's a big confusion there, you know. Anyway, more than saying that Arabization, I don't think actually there's much of Arab sort of an influence in the Malay culture. Although we know that Jawi, for example, the Jawi writing is from Arabic, but over the years that has been lost. This is a very unique sort of situation where when I step back into KLIA, there's a virus immediately tells me, hey, you're mama, you know, you're Indian, you know. So this is what the mindset has to change, that we are all saya anak bangsa Malaysia. You can be Iban, you can be a Kadazan, you can be a Bajau, you can be an Indian, you can be a Malay, you can be a Chinese. We are all Malaysians. So I don't think there's much of Arab sort of, yeah.
If you were to talk to them about matters of religion and pertaining faith,
it's about Muslims and Christians protecting each other in Egypt. Muslim or Christian, we are one hand and love each other. Muslims and Christians working together in Al-Bushra. Issues in Christian-Muslim relations, Muslims protecting Christians in Egypt during the massacre. I mean, it goes on and on and on. I think this is actually, in my experience, in the last 35 years, I have traveled to about 72 countries. I always found this the scenario here quite unique. And at one point, I was very happy that it was that way. But now, I think, if I'm not wrong. And when I speak to them, and they're saying, you guys in Peninsula are out of your mind. And I said, not us, I said, please. We are very much focused. We know we are not out of our mind. So, understanding each other, we want to coexist. We want to live together. We want to respect. We want to love our neighbors. You know, Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, peace be upon him, didn't say, when he said, love thy neighbors, love your neighbor, he didn't say, love Ismail, who's your neighbor. And in the Quran, he says, Ya ayyuhan nas. He doesn't say at that point in time, hey, ya Muslim, Islam. He said, the Reverend had a big problem with his own congregation convincing them that they should allow the Muslims to use the space. But he himself has said that I will be answerable when I see my fellow brothers there in winter, virtually going to freeze. I mean, I was just telling in fact, I put it on on Facebook, and I said, can this happen in Malaysia? And somebody responded and said, in the year 3022 or something like that. I don't know where he got.
Extent, I can understand also the anger that the Muslim community has, especially those who are reading only the Utusan. Yeah, so what I'm saying is that I was quite curious. It's just this couple of days I was asking, I don't know, any Utusan reporters here? What's the circulation of Utusan? I think it's about, 170,000, I think, odd, which is given out so much in the rural areas for free. And as I walked in earlier, I mentioned to someone, this forum, we are preaching to the converted. You are people who, and they're not having iPads sitting in public hospitals. iPads are sitting in private hospitals, They are just picking up ordinary papers, and the bulk of them were reading Utusan Malaysia. And what was being shown on TV on that day? Your public channels. And the public channels have got an agenda. So, I somehow understand where the anger is coming from, because they are being fed with one kind of information. You and I understand because we read other things. Our minds are wider. So for me, yes, we need
one in red, the person sitting at the back, right at the back. Yeah, one in red. And then the hands here, 2 here, 3 on this side. Okay, I noticed, recognize. Anybody else on this side? Okay, go ahead, please. Who has the mic, please? Yeah.
Good evening. My name is Robin Rodriguez. Thank you, panel, for the insights that you've given us. I also just like to share a word that just came to my mind: political hegemony. And I like to share with you a story. And the fact that political hegemony is not something new today. In Malaysia, baby was saved, and that baby was baby Jesus. And that heralded a new beginning. What I'm trying to point out to you here today, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, is the fact that political hegemony in a country has been in existence for centuries ago. We see it happening here when there is a threat to our political stability of the party in power. And that's exactly what's happening here. So the issue...
beberapa persoalan dalam diri saya. Apa sebenarnya message yang jika hak itu kita benarkan, jadi apa sebenarnya message yang cuba pihak panel sampaikan kepada golongan Melayu Islam, terutama di kawasan kampung, especially bila tadi ada salah seorang saudara tadi mengatakan yang bahawa kita perlu liberate minda orang Melayu. Itu saja soalan saya.
Okay, nama tak dapat nama?
Hafiz Mokhtar.
Hafiz, yeah. Thank you. Terima kasih. Okay, there's another hand at the back, and then we're going to move in front, yeah.
Muslims and the Jews, they refer to one God. But the problem is that the Arab Christians, they refer to the Trinity and they refer it as Allah. So it means that if in Christianity, we can, if the Arabs can also refer to God as Allah, Arab Christians, why not? And we are also doing the same thing. So I feel that, just saying that there is a difference.
That the Allah word cannot be used by the Christians. So for me, there is an attempt by some unseen hands to actually Islamize Malaysia using all these, between race, religion, or just slowly trying to seep in, and we can see it slowly is coming in. And it is what Arif is saying just now, the Arabization of our culture. Anything.
God, what is your religion? So that's go ahead.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum and a very good evening. I came here this evening, and at the very onset, I was a little bit sad because when I met with some new friends here, and one of the persons mentioned to me that they were wondering whether the author of the letter to the Sultan actually existed, and thinking that perhaps it was, some false. Not need to be afraid. And one of the things that we can start by doing is to make sure that our voices are heard, not only by speaking out in forums like this, but to start writing. Write to your MPs, write to these aduns. Support these three guys who said, let's amend an unjust law. We should start supporting them instead of making them out like pariahs. Right now, nobody wants to touch them. I say, let's support them to amend a correct, unjust law. Let's not be silent. And I think, and I echo what Prof said just now, our friends are silent. Let's tell them, you
all know about this letter. It's still printed in the Malaysian, in the Malay Mail, but also online where they can find it. In Malay Mail online. A subject of the Sultan has written to the Sultan seeking answers and how to change. So this is a very brave move. As brave as him writing to the Chief Justice. So there are a lot of brave men around here and women. So we'll get the final comment and then we'll do a closing statements by the panelists.
Okay, actually, I would like to share about House Sabahan perspective, because I think this issue is not really very coherent. I think
I will just make a two-line comment and to conclude this. I echo what has been said in this final round of comments, and I think I am more and more convinced if the solution to racial division is to be found, I don't think it's going to be found with our politicians. They are not the solution. I think we are the solution. If each one of us can set aside to do what many people have made comments about, because whether it is government or opposition, they all have an agenda at the end of the day.
If you doubt it, please check my IC. Yeah? Now, there was this confusion among the, when you say, when an Indian Muslim wears a sari, oh, when did you embrace Islam? Are you Hindu before? So there was a confusion, and so we decided that there was going to be an event. The Tamil Muslim Development Association was launched in Ipoh. And in the launching, we brought in non-Muslim, Tamil-speaking NGOs for the launch. So what I'm going to do, and if somebody's going to question, fine. So I think the barrier to break, the terrorism as they were talking, it's true. A lot of people are terrorized. I know my staff, some of my staffs are so terrorized about these things which is happening. I think we can only take it away by love, by show of love. And on the 5th of December, when I was in Delhi to meet the former president of India, Dr. Kalam, my good fortune was Dalai Lama was there. So I had an opportunity to, and I just asked him, Your Holiness,
say anything about it. It involves them as well. So it's unjust. And the Prophet, in one of his reminded the Muslims, وَاتَّقِي دَعْوَةَ الْمَزْلُومِ فَإِنَّهُ لَيْسَ بَيْنَهَا وَبَيْنَ اللَّهِ الْحِجَابِ. Means that وَاتَّقِي دَعْوَةَ الْمَزْلُومِ, and fear the dua or the invocation of people who are being persecuted. For their invocation has no layers between their invocation and God. Means that God will hear it and God will react upon it. So be them Muslims or non-Muslims alike. Wattaqi da'watal mazlum, whoever they will be persecuted.
it was not law by parliament, but it was by the cabinet and then gazetted that these prohibited words along with the Al-Kitab, that's the Indonesian translation of the Bible, were put under the ISA. And why? Simply that these, if it is put in all in this language, it would be a source of confusion. That's the word they say. And secondly, it opens the door for proselytizing. Why we need to translate? No. How do we translate? What is the reason for translation? No, dia kata tidak. Habis? Yeah.
Malaysia.
Yeah.
So, hence my question is this, is that
Work together for peace. So Malaysia does not advocate it. We know why they don't. Because it fits the agenda to provide a very parochial understanding of Islam. Then the point about Islamization and how it's affecting Malaysia. I give you this example. You remember we had a problem with the custody of children when one spouse convert out to Islam. Remember that? And it reappeared last year with that federal territory bill. The constitution is being rewritten. And if you ask about that question about Islamization, this is what is happening. That even if there's a decision made in cabinet which represents the collective interests of coalition partners belonging to different cultures, ethnic groups and religions, there is now something working within our society which can supersede or make that life difficult for all of us. And these are, I think the lawyers will have to deal with that. But I think this is a grand narrative that is being propagated by the politicians, but an alternative narrative that is the voice of the oppressed and the suffering and the victims and the marginalized in our society. And when those come to the fore, then as you have said, over 2,000 years, the powers, we have to deal with the powers, we will see that the powers will be called into account. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, first of all, I think it's been a good discussion. Do you agree with me? Malaysia belonging to all Malaysians. And we cannot just, I think Siti said, people are talking quietly in the corners. Everybody has something to say, but if you talk quietly, where does that message go? You let the few people who get access to, I mean, the Utusan Malaysia is mentioned a lot. It must be a very famous paper in Malaysia. The few people who keep protesting and denouncing voices of moderation, like all the 4 panel speakers, and your voice, they get the loudest voice. Ironically, Malaysia, led by Prime Minister Najib, is leading. If you cannot be government, what should you do? Yeah, resign, go and have teh tarik and don't disturb us, you know. That's the kind of message we need to give. So, I think to close this, there were so many quotes. Now I have to choose which is the best quote for the night. Which one shall we give the championship? Is it Martin Luther King? He's been meeting many